I am Karen Cross, CEO of the Greater Kingston Chamber of Commerce, and I just want to take a couple of minutes on housekeeping. I know we're all aware of the masks that we now live with, so if you're seated and you're drinking your beverage, you don't have to have your mask on, but if you do stand up to ask a question, you do have to put your mask on. Simple as that. And for Q&A, it won't be what we were thinking because we don't have Zoom set up unless our gentleman shows up. First of all, I'd just like to thank our host today, Holiday Inn Waterfront. Thank you so much for having us here this morning, as well as our sponsor, Utilities Kingston. Thank you so much for sponsoring our very first in-person event. The State of the City has always been a key event for the Chamber. It gives us an opportunity to connect with business community with our elected officials. So as we looked back, we went, now is time to continue. As we look forward, we want to prioritize and execute some new ideas and felt the time was right for the third installment of the State of the City. This is an event that has always been once a year. Now we've gone to 3 times in 1 year. Due to the situation that we're in, we felt it was important that we continued that connection, and we're confident in our mission to continue these meaningful opportunities to engage with our members, our MP, our MPP, and our mayor. So all of our voices are heard. So I'm going to keep myself very short so that we can hear from the gentleman. So please welcome to the podium Chris Mars, General Manager of the Holiday Inn Waterfront, our host today.
Good morning. I used to be a chef, so I think I can project my voice well enough. If you can't hear me, just let me know. Good morning, members of the Chamber, and of course, our elected government officials here. Welcome to the Holiday Inn Waterfront. I am, of course, Christopher Mars, General Manager here at the hotel, and General Manager of this newly renovated institution that's been a part of the downtown landscape since 1966. So since late November of last year, we've undergone some extensive changes to all aspects of the guest stay, from drastic changes to our lobby, which many of you hopefully noticed when you walk through the doors, and newly renovated guest rooms. We also redesigned our meeting space that you're in right now, and we're actually just in the process of finalizing some beautiful changes to our pool and fitness center that we anticipate to wrap up here in the next couple of weeks. If you've had a chance to dine in our newly rebranded restaurant, Wharf and Feather, you probably would have also noticed some pretty big changes there. If you haven't had a chance, obviously, we'd love to see you and really look forward to welcoming guests on our patio into the new year. We have also made significant changes to our associate areas, such as providing them with newly designed and furnished back-of-house areas so that these hardworking staff members also have a comfortable place to relax while they're here on shift. So this $12 million investment made by our owners demonstrates their commitment to this community and our local economy. They have chosen to continue to further invest in Kingston because of the longstanding tradition of success the city holds, alongside its ability to adapt, and something I think that this year has really brought forward for all of us. Kingston's outstanding reputation is one of the reasons I personally chose to relocate here 7 months ago and to call this beautiful city my home. I look forward to further integrating myself within the business community and support local every chance I get. Thank you all again for coming this morning, and for those tuning in virtually, whether they are or not. I look forward to continuing to correspond with many of you as we forge through these difficult months ahead, helping one another wherever we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Please welcome to the podium Jim Keach, President and CEO, Utilities Kingston, our sponsor today.
Great. Thank you very much. So for someone that, generally speaking, nobody sitting across the desk can hear, projecting to the back of the room will be a challenge, but I will try and do my best. I just want to first start by thanking the Chamber, and particularly Dana, for giving us the opportunity to take part in this event. And I think the Chamber has a number of very key events, and I always view this as one of the premier ones. So thank you very much. We do appreciate that. I am well aware that absolutely nobody in the audience came here to listen to me today, and everybody is waiting for me to get out of the way so you can hear the 3 of these. And I promise to keep my speech to about 45 minutes, so I won't go on too long. I'm just taking your time.
It's typical of what you were always like.
Mark and I have had a great relationship over the years, as you can tell. There are a couple things, I will be brief, but there are a couple things I do want to touch on briefly. A little bit of our change of focus at Utilities Kingston to I would say be a little bit more development friendly and help out people like those who are members of the chamber. And also just touch a little bit on our strategy dealing with the pandemic that we're in. And as I said, I'll do these relatively quickly. So the predecessor organization, the Kingston PUC, where I started, although it was in existence for over 100 years, the organization's Utilities Kingston and Kingston Hydro actually just celebrated our 20th anniversary almost exactly a month ago. And our primary focus, as you could imagine, is providing basic utility services. I often refer to this as keeping the lights on. We do more than that. We provide drinking water, we treat sewage, supply of natural gas, fiber optic network, very fast, very reliable, that has really become a focus, and people notice the importance of that today, much more than they did a few months ago. And also look after the traffic lights, street lights for you as well. And as I said, that's been the primary focus since we've been formed, but also since amalgamation. One of our key focuses has been on infrastructure improvements, either replacing end-of-life infrastructure or infrastructure that was at capacity. Some of the projects that I talk about, the redundant pipes under the Cataraqui River, the first one that we undertook, we've upgraded a number of treatment facilities, the Ravensview treatment plant, the Cataraqui Bay plant that we're working on. Also built a couple of water towers, pumping stations. In working with Queen's University, we brought another high-pressure gas main into the city to support their cogen project. Done a lot of work on replacing poles, electric infrastructure, and also the linear assets. A lot of focus on sewer separation, so we don't have the bypass. And one of the premier projects, and ones that I'm actually most proud of, is the downtown, the Big Dig projects that we worked on with a number of you and the BIA. So that had been our focus up until about 5 years ago. Now it still is, there's still a lot of work to do. But at that point in time, we actually tried to shift more to how we can help the community grow and build with a lot of the work that was going on. And that actually factored into our Kingston Hydro strategic plan, the UK plan that we're looking at. And one of the things I'm just going to touch on, and this was an issue that was brought to us by the chair of Kingston Hydro, the mayor, being a little bit more willing to work with developers in charges for electric infrastructure as you build new buildings and whatnot. And we have got a new plan in place that I think will be seen much more friendly and easy to work with, that we're quite happy to talk about. So that was the one item. The second one, I don't think you can talk to any group without mentioning the pandemic. And I just wanted to very briefly talk about kind of how we've changed our focus. And it's something I'm actually pretty proud of what we did at Utilities Kingston. I think, you know, as we got to the end of March, we've been in this for a couple of weeks, we sat down and said, you know, we're not out of this in weeks or months. We need to start looking to the summer, then to the end of the year. And believe it or not, now we're actually making plans into next summer. And we changed our focus, and our focus really is on two things. And they seem very simple, I know that. But the first one is the health and safety of our employees and the public. And I say the public because we are in a number of homes, and it's important that we respect the public when we go in. And secondly, I talked about the basic services we supply, making sure that we can continue to do this throughout the pandemic. And the first one feeds into the second one, because if we don't have healthy employees, we're very labor intensive. We can't continue to do that. And you know, you may say, well, you know, that's just what we normally do. I agree, but we've talked to our employees, and we have their commitment and dedication to focus on that, because good Lord, the last thing this community needs is a massive power outage that goes on for days, or a boil water advisory dealing with everything that we have. So I will guarantee you, you can count on us to do that. I just again want to thank the Chamber. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for listening. I am looking forward to the main presentation, and please everybody be safe. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jim. And now we get to hear from the elected officials. So we're going to start with His Worship, Brian Patterson.
Well, thank you very much, Karen, and good morning, everybody. It is an absolute pleasure to see you all in person. I'm sure we've all had our fill of Zoom meetings over the last number of months, and being able to connect in person is just, it's something that you kind of take for granted. But being able to do this here and now is fantastic. I do want to say, first of all, how much I admire and appreciate the work, not only of the Chamber as an organization, but each of you individually in your own spheres, your own businesses, in your own lines of work, managing, adapting, changing with circumstances that often have been changing week to week, sometimes day to day. The challenge and the stress on your organizations is something that I'm keenly aware of, and I am so proud of our community, of the way that we have handled things. An unprecedented challenge this year, and we know we have a tough road ahead of us. It's hard to know. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes it's hard to know how long the tunnel is. But if we can hang together, work together, that's always been a key strength of our community. I think that's a critical piece. So I'm really delighted and certainly always ready to continue to work with all of you. My door is always open. Ordinarily, for a State of the City that I would do in person, I would have a giant slide deck and I would quickly run through a whole whack of different things, a whole sphere of what the city's doing. I'm not going to do that this time. Thanks, Steve. I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to highlight a few things that are going on. And certainly, and I know that both MP Gerritsen and MPP Arthur will, the three of us will happily take any questions that you guys have. So, did I do that, or was that? Oh, great. Super. Super. That's great. So the first thing that I'm going to lead off with is the work of the Kingston Economic Recovery Team. So this is a group of community leaders that I brought together earlier this spring, representatives from the sectors of our local economy that have been hardest hit by the pandemic, and really kind of bringing together for two purposes. Number one, helping to respond to the immediate challenges, the day-to-day stuff that we have to deal with. How do we help businesses to cope? How do we help people and workers to be able to hang on? But also some medium-term stuff about how do we plan for the months ahead? How do we get people through this period? And how do we lay a foundation to make our economy better and stronger on the other side of the pandemic? And so it's been a great group to work with. What I can say certainly on the immediate front, certainly the discussions we're having right now is certainly on an advocacy piece, pushing hard for a regional approach. We know that there are some big challenges in Toronto and in Ottawa. Here locally, we've been doing very well, and so part of the push that I've had as mayor is to make sure that when it comes to public health measures, making sure that they're measures that make sense for Kingston. And we know that that's important. At the same time, how do we adapt? How do we make sure that we are adapting in a way that is still instilling that confidence that we need as an economy to be able to encourage people to shop local, to support local, to go out and to engage in a number of activities that we know are so important for our business community. There's a bunch of things that I could mention, but one of the things that I will just talk about is a measure that kind of grew out of this was the Love Kingston Marketplace. So how do you kind of go back to the drawing board and say, how do we encourage people to come out and to shop and support businesses, but in a way that is respectful of public health guidelines, making sure that people are safe. And so coming up with a number of different ventures to be able to do that, certainly in the downtown core, whether it's expanded patios or other activities in Market Square, again, that are comfortable for people, but ultimately achieve those aims. And I think that certainly Tourism Kingston and some other organizations here in the city have done a great job working together on this piece. And basically, so this was something I think worked quite well in the spring and the summer. How do we translate that into fall and winter? So having a festival of lights and having skating and doing other activities that can kind of draw people out, but in a way that, again, will make people feel as safe as possible to be able to support local businesses. So I think that really when we talk about strategies like this, obviously, we're focused on things that can help the business sector across the community, but we know that the downtown in particular is in a very fragile state. We know that there have been closures. We know that there are other businesses that are really struggling right now. And so as a city, we've been talking about ways that we can signal support and growth and strength for the future. And so one of those has been looking at housing in the downtown. Now, of course, this is an issue that has been discussed at length over the last 4 years. Certainly in my view as mayor, it was really key for us to be able to try to make some progress on this at a critical time, to send a signal that the downtown has a bright future ahead of it. And part of that bright future is having more people living in the downtown core. And so part of that was a redesigned Capitol condo. So the original project, which was a 16-story building, that was then revised down to a 12-story building that has a podium field. This is the look from Queen Street. and has commercial space. It has a setback design, something that has a lot of architectural features to make it fit better. These are the sorts of things that we need to be able to figure out how to do as we continue to encourage development in the core. The other thing that I will say is that our housing market has been red hot this year. And certainly anecdotally, I've heard from many real estate agents and others about the number of people that are departing from the Toronto area, almost fleeing the Toronto area. And that has created enormous potential for a community like Kingston, particularly with the advent of remote work and the opportunity of being able to live in Kingston, and maybe you're running into the office maybe once a week or once every couple of weeks. So that's a tremendous opportunity for us. And it's one of those things where we have this dual track. We're trying to address the challenges we face now, but also plan for the opportunities of the future. And one of those things we need to do to get ready for that is more housing. We have an ambitious target as a city to add 3,000 new housing units over this term of council. We're well on our way to being able to achieve that target. So all of that has been positive. The challenge, of course, and this is the economist in me speaking out here, is that when you've got pressure on your housing market, what happens is you get higher prices. Higher housing prices, higher rental prices. That's really created a lot of pressure on our housing affordability, which is a competitive advantage for us. So one of the things that we've been doing, working closely with private sector, nonprofit housing partners to be able to address options for affordable housing. And so on the left, that is an aerial view of the future site of the Hillendale Community Development. I think an exciting development of mixed housing with affordable units. It's at the corner of Princess Street and Hillendale Avenue. I've had great discussions with MP Garrettson on this, and he's a big proponent. We've put our application into the city or into the federal government, where we're asking for some funding from that level of government to have that project go ahead. That's the kind of thing that we need to be able to do more of as a city. On the right is 113 Lower Union, and this is a property that the city purchased earlier this year as a potential site for supportive housing. And supportive housing is something that's really come to the radar on the city over the last few months, particularly in the discussions with the encampment at Bell Park. And really what we're dealing with here is not just a situation with homelessness, but also people needing those supports around them so that people can work through maybe the challenges that maybe led to homelessness in the first place. And so MPP Arthur has been a great partner on that project, and we're looking forward to more good news on that. I'm just going to mention a couple of other things. As I said, you look for opportunities even through the tough times, and one of those opportunities has actually been travel. It's surprising because air travel is nowhere near where it would ordinarily be right now. But the discussions we had with other airlines wanting to offer service in Kingston has been really encouraging. So we were able to announce a new partnership with Fly GTA, which connects into the Porter airline network, which is something we've always been looking at. And we're also having some discussions with some other airlines as well. And so it's interesting at a period like this, we can have those discussions, get our foot in the door, that ultimately on the other side of the pandemic can offer some good travel options. The other thing that I will say is that when it comes to a tough economic time, you really need the public sector, and certainly to be able to engage in infrastructure development. It creates economic imprint, which I think is really important, and really, again, kind of shows that we are building for the future. And so construction on the third crossing continues on time, on budget. Later on this month, we'll be opening the new overpass on John Counter Boulevard by the train station. That'll be a really significant piece for us. The third crossing continues, and just the number of people that I've heard from to say, just seeing construction projects like this, just send the message that we're pressing through, we're working together, and we're going to get through this, and we're ultimately going to end up stronger as a community. So I think I'm going to stop there. Again, I want to allow lots of time for questions, but again, I just want to say thank you so much to the Chamber, to all of you, for all your great work. We're going to stick together, we're going to work together as a community, and we're going to be better for it. So thank you very much. Just in time.
Well done, Mayor. For anyone who doesn't realize, Wendy is timekeeping. So next, we're going to hear from MPP, the Honourable Ian Arthur.
Good morning, everyone. Not honorable until I'm a minister. We'll get there. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. It's kind of crazy to be in a room full of people. It's a good feeling, I think. I'm happy to see you all. And, we're a little further apart. There's less food, but it's nice to kind of be back here doing this sort of thing. I'm going to talk about the state of the city from a provincial perspective. And like the mayor, I do want to start by thanking everyone who has contributed to this community during this pandemic. The response from Kingston has been remarkable. The stories that we hear of this community coming together, of the generosity of those who are able to give to help those who are suffering during this time, is inspiring, and it should inspire all of us, and it makes me want to do better at my job, to work as hard as I possibly can to make sure that we do pull through this and come out the other side as strongly as we possibly can. So thank you. I know many of the businesses in this room have done that, have been able to help other members of the community in their times of need. So a heartfelt thank you to all of you who really stepped up during this time. It is tremendous to be able to see that. I will talk a little bit about what government programs there are, and I am going to talk a little bit about what government programs there aren't from a provincial perspective, because I think that's really important. Most of the work that the province has done, they announced their business plan in March and April, and there was some new funding in the realm of healthcare, but a lot of their programs were targeted tax relief and tax credits for businesses as it relates to the people in this room. And it's financial relief and penalty relief on business taxes, a recovery rate for regulated price plan customers for hydro, although those rates are now increasing by 2% as of November 1st. And pausing of commercial evictions, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. There's a couple other components to their plan. They're a little bit small, if I'm going to be honest. I really wish I was up here telling you more of the programs that were available from the provincial government. I am in opposition, and we have continued to push the government to step up where it is most needed. And we understand that where it is most needed is direct financial supports for businesses who are suffering. I'll elaborate on that a little bit right now. The supports that are there are inadequate. I understand that. And I don't want to beat around the bush on that. I don't want to pretend that they are something that they are not. But we have had a lot of success in our advocacy for better programs from the provincial government. Throughout this pandemic, and I've told many of you this before, we have been focused on providing, identifying gaps where we see gaps in supports, making sure that we have constructive input. It's not critical for the sake of being critical, that it is constructive and that it is working towards a goal of helping businesses and individuals across the province, and that it's feasible that the proposals we put forward could be implemented. We're not asking for pie in the sky things from this government. We are asking for concrete steps that are well within the fiscal reality of the province. And we've been very careful to do that because we don't want them to come back at us. We could never actually manage to roll that out. We have had some successes. We advocated for the deferment of daycare fees without losing spots, and we were happy to see that implemented. We were the first to advocate for changes to an auto insurance. And we were happy to see the government urging auto insurance companies to give people rate reductions. We would like to see that legally mandated, and we'd like to see it reflective of the diminishment in costs of those that those insurance companies experienced during the pandemic. We pushed for and still support the Small Business Transition Fund. That was a proposal of our Save Main Street plan, and it was adopted by the government to help businesses transition their sales online and create portals to do that. So we're really happy to see that rolled out. And we have been advocating throughout this pandemic since March for a ban on commercial evictions during the pandemic. They did put a moratorium on it that is different than a legislated ban, and they have passed legislation banning evictions, but they are passing that legislation 1 month at a time, which frankly is ridiculous. That does not provide any sort of stability for a business who isn't in a position of needing rent relief, of fearing losing a spot where they have built their business in a community. It needs to be longer. It needs to be long-term. It needs to just say, we will not allow for commercial evictions throughout this pandemic, And I'll talk a little bit about how we would do that without hammering the landlords at the same time. We recently released our updated Save Main Street plan. And basically, we came out with it in the spring when everyone was in a panic. These are the basic things that we think need to be implemented right now so that people can have a modicum of stability moving forward. And then as we kind of arrived in this new normal and looked down the second wave, we wanted to update that plan, make sure it was still relevant, make sure that the asks that we have of the government and the projects that we are proposing reflected the needs of the time, that they have been adapting. So we continue to advocate for a commercial rent subsidy. This needs to be tenant-driven. The OSECRA program is broken. It is a terrible program. It's a joint program between the federal and provincial governments. It has had less than 10% uptake of the available funds in Ontario. That's a program not designed to work. It was designed to be driven by the landlords and not the business tenants, and that was the wrong way to go about that. This needs to be business owner driven. And so we're proposing 75% rent subsidy for business owners. We have advocated for that since March. We are not going to stop pushing the government on that. We do it every single week that the legislature sits. We are advocating for a freeze in utility payments, and we understand the need to work with utility companies to do that. I'm not trying to put you out of business, Jim. At all. And we're advocating for additional supports for women, like dedicated retraining and office supports in offices. This pandemic has been hardest on specific groups in society. Previously disadvantaged groups, visual minorities, newcomers, new Canadians, and women. When you look at the statistics of who was laid off, who lost their jobs, it is felt more by certain sectors of the economy than it is by others. And the response needs to recognize that. When you are putting forward funds and proposals, the government's role is to help kind of counterbalance that and advocate for those sort of supports going forward. This includes affordable daycare to make sure that women can get back into the workforce. I'm happy to see the federal government begin talking about a national daycare program. It's long overdue. We know it works. The economic benefits that came out of Quebec's affordable daycare program, you can't really argue with it. There are years of concrete data that show why this is so important for us to do. And if we wanted to do one thing to stimulate the economy coming out the other side of COVID, affordable daycare, it's not going to be the silver bullet that solves everything, but it would add a tremendous amount to our recovery. And so we're going to push for that on a provincial side to make sure that the province does work with the federal government in implementing this, and I really hope that that works. Everyone always had slide decks, so I caved and made a slide deck. I hate slide decks. I only have one slide, and we can go to that now. I use the remote. I can go to that now. We've had tremendous success when we've worked with companies individually. We have never not been able to find a way forward, whether it's working with Hugh on figuring out how to have a small season for the Island Queen, or local manufacturers to be able to continue to operate safely. And I think that's really important, and I think it's really, really important that we are more accessible than ever. So my only slide is my phone number. My door is always open. And I mean that sincerely. Whether you want to tell me your story and what is affecting you, whether there's one part of a government program that you are having trouble interacting with, we will figure out a way to make it work. My door is always open. Or if you just want to share your stories of how you've adapted in the pandemic, I don't mind. I'm here. Believe it or not, I am most comfortable giving speeches in this room. I love the state of the city, and it's nothing to do with whether you voted for me or whether you agree with NDP policies. It's where I came from. Every single one of you who is 30 seconds, wrap up. Pointed. Every single one of you is in the process of pursuing your dream and making it a reality. And I was so proud of the work that I was able to do in the restaurant at Chez Piggy, and I want to do everything that I can possibly do to help you realize those dreams and make sure that this pandemic does not shatter them. That is our job. We need to make sure that there are the supports that are necessary for you to come through the other side of that, and I will not stop working to make that happen. I think that the businesses that you have brought to this city are incredible. They're what makes it such a vibrant, amazing place to live. And I get so happy whenever I go to Toronto when I'm on my way home. This community means everything to me. I'm so thankful to get to represent it, and I will not stop advocating for you at any point during this term. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. And next, our Member of Parliament, Mark Gerritsen.
Thank you very much, and it's great to see everybody. And thank you for the Chamber for putting this event on. Thank you to our host, the Holiday Inn. I don't imagine that you ever thought that your room would be set up like this and people would be wearing masks. It's a different world we live in, and I look forward to getting through this so that we can get back to business as usual. Also, I was in a rush to get in here and parked in one of the preferred guest parking spots, so please don't tow me. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you to our sponsor, Utilities Kingston, for stepping up in a time like this to sponsor this event when it would be, for a lot of small businesses, would be quite challenging. I'll say that, we're really lucky to have Utilities Kingston. And I know that some members of our development community and like to beat up on Utilities Kingston. I always had my fair share of taking shots at Jim Keach. But when you look at the various utility companies throughout Ontario and Canada, we really are lucky to have Utilities Kingston here with the quality and level of service that they provide. So thank you, Jim, for sponsoring this. I want to say, I only have 4 slides, not a lot. But I did also just want to quickly apologize for abruptly canceling the last meeting when we were supposed to do this. That was on my accord. I was in Ottawa. It was a Tuesday. I was on my way up to the Hill, and my wife called and said, "I'm really sick and I don't have a sense of taste or smell." And I called my whip, and he said, "Do not come to the Hill, get in your car, go straight home, and self-isolate till she gets her test result." Her result didn't come in until Saturday morning, and this was scheduled for Friday. So on Thursday, I had to call and cancel, which is why you all got a late notice to cancel, and I apologize for that. Good news, she and my 4-year-old, who also developed some symptoms, both tested negative, so we're all good there. I think, in my discussion today, I'm really going to focus on the higher level, what the federal government's been doing and what it's been able to provide to citizens and businesses and individuals throughout Canada. And I think to do that, I need to set the stage by showing where we are right now in comparison to other countries, G7 countries in particular, throughout the world. So it's my first slide here of 4 is just a table that shows where Canada is in terms of our unemployment rate, our debt to GDP ratio of how much we're spending to get through this compared to other countries, and the death per million population. And I think that the last column is important because the death per million population, in my opinion, you can correlate it directly to unemployment. Countries like United Kingdom that has a 4.1% unemployment rate, their death to per 1 million population is 630 people. Whereas Canada, where our unemployment rate now is 9%, our death to per million population is 251. And I think it's important because when we talk about programs like CERB and other programs like the government brought in, CERB was just as much to help Canadians with the money they need as it was to encourage people to stay home. The government said, we want people to stay home. We're going to give you $2,000 a month to do that. And the motivation there was to make sure that we could keep as many people as safe as possible. And that's why when you look at a chart like this, you can see the correlations between countries that continued to have people work and the number of people that were dying in these countries, if I can be very candid about that. The debt to GDP ratio is also important. I talk about this a lot because it puts us in a position of showing you the fiscal firepower of Canada. We were in an amazing position fiscally going into this to be able to deal with this pandemic. And as a result, right now, we're spending 53% of our GDP on debt, whereas other countries like Italy, 150%, the United States, 125% of their GDP is going is debt right now. They're spending that's the amount of debt that they're spending. So that just gives you the context of where Canada is compared to our allies, to G7 countries, we have more allies than that, obviously. I got called out once for saying that, but we have lots of allies, but to our G7 countries. Now I want to focus on what your federal government's been doing for you. And this is a lot easier conversation to have with MPP who is a member of the opposition than it would be if it was a member of the government there. Because what I can tell you is that your federal government throughout this has been there for you, full stop. And the next slide I'm going to show demonstrates that. Of all of the money that has been spent in Ontario on COVID relief efforts, 97% of it has come from the federal government. 3% of it has come from the provincial government. We have a constitution in this country. Our provinces are not subordinate to our federal government. We have responsibilities on an equal footing. And it is unfortunate, in my humble opinion, and I'm not trying to get political on this, I'm just trying to stay at the levels of government. It is unfortunate, in my opinion, that our provincial government has not stepped up with the resources. I have gained a lot of respect for Mr. Ford throughout this. I actually really have. I applauded the announcement last week of changing the GM plant into, working with the federal government to change that GM plant into a new plant to build electric cars. I think it was the right move to make. But unfortunately, our provincial government has not been there to deliver when it comes to the actual resources. And so that's why I'm glad to see our member of provincial parliament continuing to push that. This slide basically backs up everything that he was saying about the lack and the fact that they've been pushing for more and more programs and support from the provincial government. Now I'll jump to the support that through that 97% of funding in Ontario, where it's been going. Where we've been, 8.79 million Canadians have received the CERB to this point. And we all know what that is. I don't need to describe the acronym. 3.5 million in Ontario. And I just want to say, when it comes to programs in particular like CERB, it was our I say city staff because I'm thinking of but it's the staff, it's the government officials that really delivered that program. Let's just recap and go back to the spring for a second. In a matter of 1 month and 4 days, our country went from the World Health Organization declaring a global pandemic to having money in the bank accounts of 5.4 million Canadians. 1 month and 4 days. That could never have been done by just the politicians making policy. That is the incredible bureaucracy, staff, resources that put their time into making sure that all of that Canadians were taken care of in their time of need. And we have a huge amount of appreciation. We should be giving a huge amount of appreciation for those individuals that made that happen. But I mean, we also want to focus on what's to come. And I'm sure when it comes to individuals, that's what a lot of people are thinking. So what we've done is we've taken CERB, which ended at the end of September, and converted it into a new EI program, which you'll see rolling out for individuals that need it. We've also created the Canada Recovery Benefit. This is to replace the portion of CERB that went to people that could not apply for EI. So if you're self-employed and you need resources, you need funding because you don't, your income has dropped off significantly, the Canada Recovery Benefit that is there to help you. There's also a couple other benefits, a sickness benefit and a caregiver benefit that were also added. And then my last slide talks about the supports for businesses specifically, which I imagine the majority of you would be interested in. Where we've come from. 106,000 small businesses received the Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. It was a big there was a lot of problem there, and I'd love to talk about that if somebody asks me a question about it. We've assisted 994,000 employees. The rent support alone was worth $1.3 billion. The Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which I imagine a number of businesses have tapped into, I know a number in our community have tapped into, 1.1 million applications approved, 37.4 billion in wage subsidy. And what's coming next? What was just passed by Parliament, and I will add, every program has been passed unanimously by Parliament. As much as we fight in Parliament, we came together and all these were passed unanimously. All this spending, Liberals, Conservatives, NDP, Green, Independents, everybody voted in favor of this. Our objective is to create 1 million jobs, to get us back to a lower unemployment rate, extend the wage subsidy for businesses into next summer, support women who are being more negatively impacted by this when it comes to our economy and their participation in our economy, and finally to support further supports for businesses. I think I'm the only one that actually went over the 10 minutes because my 30-second wrap-up was about 45 seconds ago. But I'm more than happy to to answer your questions. And of course, as always, I have my contact information too. Please feel free to contact my office. We're here to help. I've taken one of my staff members from Ottawa, brought them to Kingston, where we are helping people in our community get them the resources and supports they need. If you're just wondering, can my business apply for this? Contact us. Let us look into that for you. We're here to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Now, what you've all been waiting for, Q&A. It's now your turn. So, the gentlemen are just gonna stay where they are. Just project. If you want to stand up, you can certainly stand up and project. Just ask who you're asking the question of, and you can ask away. And I have a hand up already.
Yes, I'm going to direct it to Mark. I just had two questions. One of them is a naive question, and I'm sure the answer's not easy, but when I was adding up what's been spent, it added up to over $1 trillion. So the naive question is, how are we going to pay that back? Like, what happens? I know some of the plans are
Well, it's an excellent question, and we're going to have to make some choices as to how we want to do that. The total amount spent is just over $300 billion. The debt of Canada now is just over $1 trillion, or right around $1 trillion, which is what you're getting at. We're going to have to make some choices as to how we're going to do that. We're going to have to decide if people are going to have to be taxed more, which personally I'm not in favor of, or if we're going to do it through growth. Growth means changing our immigration policies to let more people come into Canada, like we saw after World War II, which was a way that we promoted growth. We might have to do it through providing other incentives to make sure that we have the technologies of tomorrow ready to go ahead with, so that the announcement between the provincial government and the federal government on retooling the GM plant to make the cars of tomorrow. These are the things that we're going to have to be investing in and thinking about as we move forward. How do we grow our economy from an actual people capacity? Do we promote more immigration? Or do we invest more in businesses? Do we look to grow our economy in different ways? We're going to have to make some decisions around that. But the good news is, we're all in this together from a global perspective. Everybody has had to do this. So everybody is going to have to make these decisions together. This is the unique thing, and I think it's very telling of the time that we live in, is that what we're facing, all of our allies are facing this, all countries throughout the world are facing this, and we're going to have to get through it together, and we're going to be making choices as to how we do that.
my other one was just quick on the rent subsidy. I forgot exactly what the program's called. I thought that I read somewhere that was extended to next June, that they've divided it up, so they put some of the onus on, or the support, I should say, they divided it more between the business and the actual property owners, etc. Can you just
I'm not 100% certain on the date, maybe I know it's been extended, but it's been extended. I'm not sure of the exact date. But you know, I will say the challenging thing about the rent subsidy for commercial businesses is this. The federal government does not have jurisdiction over rent. That's the provincial government. It's the only program that that stumbled out of the gates, that was very challenging for a lot of landlords to do, especially landlords that didn't have a mortgage on a property, because it required taking out a mortgage on the property. And the reason why the federal government did that was because, and quite frankly, if I can be blunt and be completely honest with you, the federal government had been after the province saying, we need to do something, we need to do something, we need to do something. We need to work together, we need to come up with a solution. And the province was just dragging their feet, and they were refusing to come up with something that credibly put money into that program. So finally the federal government said, you know what, we'll go at it on our own. The only avenue that the federal government had jurisdiction over is mortgages. So that's why the federal government ended up going the route of the mortgages, because they could circumvent the requirement to deal with the rent issue with the province. And it ended up being a massive, I'm trying to use a non, you know, it was a big problem, okay? But at the end of the day, you know, we were trying to get supports out there, but we had to do it within our constitutionally accepted methods of engagement, for lack of better expression.
Yeah.
I like to tee him up like this.
Well, it was so well done. There was this period of time where I think the Premier had it in his head that if he had all the empathy and compassion in the world and didn't announce anything, that bit by bit the feds would be forced to come to the table with the programs, and the money would be shifted into the federal realm. Now, even though the feds did step up on that program, and it is a partnership, it has to be a partnership between the province and the federal government, the design of the program was not easily adoptable. It just wasn't, and we know that. We know the 10% uptake, I think, is reflective of how well it works. Now, other provinces adapted that program, so it worked better. It works better in BC, and it works better in Quebec. Quebec kicked up extra money to make sure the landlords weren't out the full 25%. We asked the Ontario government to do that. We pushed the Ontario government to do that. They have refused. So I'm not going to, you know, paint a better picture than that. I don't feel the need. You can have all the compassion and empathy in the world. If you don't put the money behind it, you know, the dollars have to be there.
And I actually have a follow-up, I have a
Yeah,
question that
can
came
I-
online about this whole.
Yeah, and I just want to add something to that, which
Okay.
is that the only reason why I'm being very critical right now of the provincial government is because I'm trying to illustrate with that pie graph so that you understand the situation. So that 2 years from now, when Jason, who is renowned for getting up and attacking me on debt, I can say, hey, remember that graph? Who took us through this pandemic? You know, I'm just trying to make sure that you have the information so that you can properly assess this later on, because inevitably this is something that's going to come back to bite the federal government. The federal government stepped up, put all this money in, but years from now, the opposition is going to say, this debt, this debt, this debt, even though they voted in favor of all of it. But the point is that's what's going to happen. So I'm not, I got my own fights. I don't need to get into the provincial realm. But I'm just trying to set the scenario so people understand what's actually going on.
Okay, and I'm just gonna continue on this, there's a question around this that came in to me earlier. And this is really to the mayor about the rent. I'm gonna shorten this question. My problem is with the rent rebate program, where the landlord has to donate 33% of the grant, is not a small landlord, a small business subject to significant financial problems, as is to his tenants. The tenant is assisted, and the landlord is penalized. My wonder is, could the city, with perhaps the help of the upper levels, forgive a portion of the municipal tax equal to the landlord's contribution? Coming from Mark Raymond.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a time where I think all levels of government need to be working together, and I get it. There's you know, some tensions and some issues and challenges that come up, but certainly, you know, as a city, we've made it very clear. We want to come to the table and do the part that we can. To Mark's comment on debt, the challenge for the city is that we can't carry debt. We have to balance our budget every year. So the challenge for us is that we can't borrow a bunch of money or forgive a bunch of taxes unless we're willing to then start to cut city services that I know people depend on. So that's the challenge for us. But that being said, we're very open to creative options, strategies, ways to be able to work. We have done certainly a number of tax deferrals. We are looking at strategies to be able to continue to do that because we understand the pressure that people are under. So I think the short answer probably to that is we'll do absolutely everything we can, and certainly it's been great working with both Ian and Mark, and we'll continue to strategize on that.
Next question there, and then it'll be Ian, and then
Sorry, just
Jason.
a
Okay.
thought. Municipalities are entities of the province. So at some point when we are faced, Kingston is very lucky that we were in a strong fiscal position going into this. There are many cities in Ontario that are in significantly worse places than we are, and the level of service cuts that are coming to those communities are appalling. And so, kudos to the mayor and the team at City Hall for positioning ourselves well for this. Again, it's going to be on the province to help the municipalities. They are going to need to come to the table. I get the province has way too much debt, and we need to come up with a better way of running programs so that they're more efficient, certainly, and of acknowledging that there needs to be enough revenue for a government to actually function. I'm an unapologetic democratic socialist. I know that's a hard thing to say in this room, maybe, but socialism, it distributes risk. You build resilient systems, you build programs that function really well and that support people well, they make it through the hard times, but you have to build them during the good times. You can't, we are seeing the cracks in the system. We have a healthcare system that has generational underfunding, and those cracks are becoming huge gaps. We have to make sure that those systems are running well in the good times so that during these times we are able to make it through much in the same way that the city had reserve funds and was able to do that.
So just following up on the rent subsidy, my business actually benefited a lot from, because our landlord decided to take on that. I don't know if 10% is the real number, maybe a bit higher, I don't know, but that means the money that was put towards that from the federal probably has not been totally used in Ontario. But I had to write the check for the full rent, 2 days ago. And that was a big dent in our budget for the business, because obviously we're going through all this and the wage subsidies every month. And at least we keep employed about 25, 30, mostly women in our spa. So I got really appreciative of all the program. But I wrote the check, and I'm hoping that the program will start to kick in so we can get some money back soon, because we won't be able to last long if we don't have any more rent support.
Well, you should definitely be getting that money very quickly. I always get a kick. One of my former campaign managers, who's right-wing liberal, maybe even on the blue side, always texts me and he says, "I applied on Tuesday. Money was deposited in my account today." The money has been moving along very quickly, and if you're not seeing that, then you should contact my office, Phil, and we can look into that and help you with that. That's a lot of what we've been doing, is helping individuals and businesses access that. So reach out to my office to chat about that. Regarding your first comment about the take-up, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of money sitting there left over. And because the only program that the federal government was able to do was one that involved a landlord who had a mortgage, it was the onus of the landlord to want to do the program. So if the landlord's looking for a reason to try to get rid of a tenant, well, they've just found one by saying, "No, I'm not interested in this program." If the landlord doesn't have a mortgage on the property, they now have to take a mortgage out on it just to be able to work those avenues with the federal government. It was very cumbersome. So, and Ian made an excellent point, which is that this exact same programs that were started in other provinces where the provincial governments actually wanted to be participants. So don't forget, to make this work, 25% came from the province, 25% came from the landlord, 25% from the feds, and 25% from the tenant. Now, in some provinces, as Ian said, they actually, the province picked up the other 25% or whatever it might be, the tenant's portion of it. But you saw when the province wanted to do it, the program, it took off. When when you have a province that doesn't really want to spend money, they're looking for ways to make the program, put roadblocks in the way, make it more difficult. You need willing partners to make a program like that work. And the reality is that based solely on the uptake and the way that it was rolled out, the appearance is that the province of Ontario didn't have any interest in it. And I hope people can appreciate when it came to things like CERB, the wage subsidy that a lot of businesses got, that stuff was easy to get, and it went quickly. It moved fast. If we could have developed a similar program for rent that could have moved equally fast, well, why wouldn't we? Of course we would have. But we couldn't because we were, our hands were tied in the fact that the province had to be a willing partner because it was their jurisdiction.
I'm gonna go to Hugh Mackenzie.
So the horn we heard in part of the presentation
Perfectly timed, Hugh.
was the Island Queen leaving dock for the last time this year. She's going over to winter in the Inner Harbor. We got through this season in tourism because of the phenomenal support, responsiveness of all three levels of government represented before us. Your personal involvement in the city and the patios and getting the AGCO license changed, and Arthur's office, or Ian's office was terrific in liaising with us, and Mark with the whole wage subsidies and so on. The support has been phenomenal. It has allowed to us to minimize our losses, but our losses are still huge. Our challenge right now is it's middle of October. We don't have revenue other than a small amount of retail ever until beginning of April. But we're planning. We're doing projections on what next summer is going to look like. And we're planning for bleak scenarios because that's what's in the news right now. What we really need is for all levels of government to give us visibility for our planning on what we can expect and how we can be engaged. Because the capacity restrictions that various businesses face in this pandemic, in many cases, don't make sense because we haven't been heard. We've been got all the way to the cabinet table in the province, only to be rejected by the fear principle, not rational principle. As it relates to what our seasonal will look like next season, we had a phenomenal experiment aided by the city to have the Crawford Wharf engage with a patio, to be able to have dining and dock and those things. We need to know that information now. When it comes to the wage subsidy, there's complete vagarity. Even though it goes on until next summer, we have no idea what the rules, we have no idea whether we will qualify, what the circumstances are, so how do we plan for that? Yesterday I had the unfortunate task of giving layoff notices to 5 career staff with our company. Our company is a shell of what it was, and that's fine, we understand. What we need to know is how we work together to have visibility on the planning and understanding our voice, tourism voice, for next season. Each level of government needs to decide whether tourism is an added asset, is a valuable asset to our communities, to our province, and to our country, or not. And that really is a serious question because this industry is hugely affected, and there's going to be a lot of business failures of companies that are the core of our destinations across the country. The question is, will the government step up and recognize that tourism matters and you're going to give us the support to make it work till we get back to being on our feet? Or will we just wait and see what happens? If the latter that message is clear. We need to defer salt gauge now. We need to have visibility now, not April. Don't tell us in April, oh, Gavin Queen can go from 50 passenger capacity to 150, which is half its capacity. That's too late.
Who would like to lead that?
Why don't Brian start?
So, I'll start here. So just to be clear, tourism is one of the most important sectors that we have here. There is no question. I'm keenly aware and very clear-eyed of the challenges that we are facing right now. You absolutely have an ear with me, and I think if I could just say that's one of the reasons why we've been pushing so hard for a regional approach, because when you have some decision-making power here at a local level, you can take those local conditions into play. You can bring people in the community to the table. We can find things that work out for our region that make sense. So that's something that I'm going to continue to work for, because when you get that, then that enables for a lot of these conversations to be able to come up with that. The challenge is obviously when those decisions are taken at a provincial level or further, and then I become an advocate, and I'm happy to do that, but that is a harder one. I understand, I absolutely agree. It's challenging, because I know when I talk even with our own public health folks about trying to understand what things are going to look like in the next 6 months. So I get that, but I can tell you that those conversations are happening regularly. I am a strong voice right now for business, trying to understand that yes, we understand what's going on from a public health point of view in Toronto and in Ottawa, but we are not in that same situation. So how do we make sure that we're able to understand if we become a hotspot, then that's different. Then what do we need to do locally? But if we're not, and we're continuing to do a great job as a community, there should be some payback or some reward for that, to say if everyone's working hard here locally and we're keeping our case numbers down, then how can we take advantage?
I like to tee it up for you, and then you can just. On the wage subsidy, Hugh, so the extension of that was just passed, voted on and passed. I believe the Senate has probably passed it by now, within the last week or two. So you'll see any changes to that coming out, and that'll take us to next summer. So you should see the details of that program coming out soon. When this all began, I'll never forget, everybody was loosely talking about this pandemic on a Wednesday at our caucus meeting, and by Thursday afternoon the Prime Minister's wife had tested positive. He was in isolation, and it became clear to everybody on the Hill that we were going to be going home for a couple weeks. And most of us were like, oh, this will be nice, I'll get to spend 2 weeks with my kids, we'll come back. Nobody anticipated that it would go on this long. And so it's extremely difficult to predict the end of this. I wouldn't want to step way out of my bounds by going into the medical part of this and trying to suggest that I have some understanding of pandemics. But I will say, if you take the pandemic of 1918 and chronologically overlap it with the pandemic of 2020, despite all the progress we've made in medicine, the waves are almost following exactly as they were then, globally speaking. So if you can predict some kind of outcome from that, then I think you might, be able to, create some thoughts of your own on that. And then the only other thing that I would say is that I think that the federal government has demonstrated that it will be here for Canadians to get through this, because we recognize if we don't spend it now, we're going to be spending a lot more later to support people. We want to spend the money now to get through this and to come out of it as strong as we can, so that we can get our economy back to the place that it was a year ago. And I know, you have you were shaking your head, I know you have some different opinions on that than than perhaps mine. I'm always interested in hearing what you have to say, and you do a very good job articulating it on Facebook. I follow you very closely, Hugh. But I'm always interested in hearing your thoughts on it and furthering the discussion with you. I've always appreciated the fact that you don't just complain, you offer solutions too, and you offer some points, especially on social media, that are hard to argue from time to time, especially when you share articles and graphs from other regions of the world. So I'm always interested to hear what you have to say. Feel free to reach out to me with your thoughts.
The reason we came out with the Save Main Street plan initially, it was a long-term plan, and we updated it and we tweaked it to reflect current needs, but it was done because we understand the need for stability moving forward. That plan, we costed that plan, by the way, so it's not too pie in the sky, 850 to 1.15 billion. 850 million to 1.15 billion. Considering the financial position of the province right now, we wanted to put forward a plan that we felt was constrained and was feasible for the province to take on that level of debt. It's not, our projected debt, the FAO just came out with projections, the projected debt this coming fiscal year is 37.7 billion. So it would have added a little bit more to that, yes. But I do not believe this is the right time to be trying to kill a deficit. I think that we will have opportunities to do that in the future, and it will be very important for us to do that in the future, but now is not the right time. You do need stability. So right now, Catherine Fife and I, who is our economic development critic, are working on an operational loan program that we're going to pitch to the government and try and get them to take us up on so that you can have that stability. We're paired that with an ongoing commercial eviction ban that is supported so that landlords are not put out of business by a rent subsidy. They all interrelate and they're all important parts to it. We're not trying to screw over landlords or help businesses at the expense of landlords or vice versa. We need to provide that stability moving forward, and it needs to go long enough that you can make plans. Our operational loans, what we're talking about, I think the idea that we like the most and what we're going to push for is tied to years of operation. So there's debt forgiveness tied to years of operation after the pandemic. There needs to be some responsibility to carry the business forward, but for those who figure out a way to go forward, that they get some relief on the debt that they took on with operational funds. And those funds are needed, we get that. The wage subsidy helps tremendously. Programs from utilities companies, both provincially and smaller utilities companies help, but there is just, you can't get around the need for operational capital. And when you have zero revenue coming in, restaurants made it through the summer because they had patios. And thank God we've had a warm fall. Like, it's so important. But I am terrified for the last quarter of this year and the first quarter of next year. That's when the pain is going to hit home. And pretending that we're not going to lose businesses that we love or that families aren't going to lose their homes if we don't have enough supports in place is a naivety I cannot afford to have in this role. And so I hear you, we know you need stability, we've been fighting for it from day one, and we're not going to stop.
Okay, we have two questions left in lieu of time. Jason and then Lynn. Jason Selnick?
So firstly, I sincerely thank all of you. And Mark, you may be looking at me and saying, Jason's not really thanking you. I am thanking you. I really do appreciate this. I know we've had our exchanges over the years, hopefully in fruitful debate about tax policy.
Absolutely. It's all in jest.
Yeah. And before I get to my question, which I think does tie to Hugh's point, and it's a tough question, it's to all three, I do want to highlight one point on the debt. I didn't come here to talk about debt. We have to spend right now. I think the federal government's done a really good job in getting money into Canadians' hands. But provincially, when you put up that picture with the provincial spending, what we cannot forget is our provincial debt went from 130 billion in 2002 to before the current Conservative government went up 200 billion. So 130 to basically 330 billion in debt. And that wasn't because of the Conservative government. So the current government, and I'm not here to be pro-Conservative, I just want to make sure we're real when we're talking about why isn't the provincial government spending more. Well, we should be asking, what did the government do with $200 billion in that time period? That's not my question today. It's not
I'm
about
answering it
that.
anyways.
No. I just think we gotta bring balance to that discussion,
Yeah.
Mark, because I think that's not the full picture. The question I got is really about our standard of life in Canada is based on the actual goods we produce and the actual services we provide, not the money we print and things like that. And I'm gonna read my question just to make sure it's clear. It's a difficult one. How are you balancing the pressure to limit the spread of COVID-19 by having a more closed business community versus the economic costs of making such a decision as we move forward? And we kind of talked about it, but there is a clear, and depending if your age, how old you are, your business situation, these are all complex questions.
Can
These
you
are the
repeat
debates we're having.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. How are you balancing the pressure to limit the spread of COVID-19 by having a more closed business community versus the economic costs of making such a decision as we move forward? Because there's different groups in different situations, and it's a tough one.
It's a great question. It's something that actually we talk about regularly. Because on the one hand, we understand what the costs of COVID are, but we also understand that there are real economic, social, health, mental health costs associated with shutdowns or restrictions. And I think we do have to have honest and clear conversations about that. I think that's why we're doing everything we can, certainly to try to avoid another shutdown. Even though there is some great risk as we move into a season where people are more indoors. I think we have to recognize that. I think we have to be honest. I think we have to be focused on where our most vulnerable populations are. Again, I'm a mayor of a city in one region of the province, and so to be clear, I'm not the decision maker on some of this stuff. There are some pieces, though, on a regional approach where I think that I'm going to give full credit to Dr. Moore, our local chief medical officer. He gets that. We have very honest and open conversations, and we understand that balance, and that's why I think that the more things that happen in a regional approach, the better, because we are taking account of what's going on in Kingston, what's happening in every sector, what's happening, that big picture. So the more we can do that, the better. But I'm keenly aware, and I agree, Jason. I think it's something we need to think of.
Bob Ray added to the debt significantly. Mike Harris added to the debt significantly. Mike Harris balanced one budget. He did it by selling the 407 for $3 million, at 10% of its current estimated value. Not a great fiscal decision. The Liberals added to the debt extensively, and the largest debt in Ontario's history was the Progressive Conservative budget pre-COVID. So Doug Ford's first budget was the largest deficit in Ontario's history. So no one wants to talk about the revenue side. I'm about to lose votes. No one wants to talk about the revenue side. We want governments to run well. We need to have some ability for governments to raise enough funds to deliver programs well. There are inefficiencies, sure. No one wants to have inefficiently run programs. No one is in support of that. No one in my party and no one in my Liberal colleagues or independents or the Green Party or the Conservatives. We can all come together on that. We have different ways of getting there. Federally, we're proposing a wealth tax on wealth over 20 million, a 1% tax on wealth over 20 million. As we need growth and that economic model that as long as debt acquisition is outpaced or doesn't outpace growth, then you're going to have a lower ratio of debt to GDP as you grow more is important. And I really, at this point, G7 countries have so much debt that it's the only real possibility for us to manage to bring that ratio down slowly. We're not going to ever raise enough revenue in other ways to do that. I don't believe. I think we're past that point. I think the numbers are just, as you pointed out, just too enormous to do that. I think that there are opportunities to do it better, and I think I stand behind Jeremy's call for a wealth tax, and Peter Julian's call for a wealth tax on wealth of revenue over 20 million, individual revenue over 20 million. I think starting with 1% is, I think, acceptable. To answer your question, though, you have to work with public health. You have to have a regional approach. I agree with both of those things, but you have to also understand the reality of what is actually needed. Doug Ford dragged his feet on shutting down businesses in Peel and Toronto, and I understand why he did that. We want those businesses to stay open. But the problem in a pandemic is that the lack of decisive action is detrimental. Because if people are too scared to go out and use those businesses because the wave is rising and rising and rising and rising, Doug allowing them to keep their doors open doesn't necessarily help them stay in business. No one's actually going in to buy anything at your stores because they're too scared to go into public. He's not doing those businesses any favors by allowing them to stay open a little bit longer and pushing back the inevitable. And the shutdown is going to have to be longer. The response is going to have to be longer. Decisive action early in the upswing of a pandemic is really needed, but that's also why we need those supports in place. And we need them in place early so that businesses don't panic when they know that they're in a second wave hotspot and they're going to face a harsh reality for another month or another 6 weeks or whatever it is. So you need to start from the right place. You need to have the programs in place early.
I would just add that, to the first point, I don't think it's necessarily about who takes on the debt. It's just like with your business, anybody's business. You can take on debt. It's not about debt that you take on. It's about what you're spending it on. Are you spending it on something that is going to grow your business? I mean, the provincial government looks at it the same way federal government does. Are you trying to grow your business by taking on debt? And to what extent are you growing your business? The federal government just looks at it the same way. To what extent is our GDP extending as a result of taking on this debt? And to that point, we had, going into this, the lowest unemployment rate in Canada's history of recording it since the 1960s. The lowest unemployment rate. And that's not just the federal government. That's because provinces like Ontario were investing in things, were putting money into things that were growing the economy. So yes, you're absolutely right, Jason. You have to look at those other things. But you can't stop just at the debt and how much debt there was. You have to look at what the accumulation of that debt was doing and how it was growing the economy. And the only other thing that I would add is, have you had to renew your mortgage since all this began? Because I'm renewing mine right now. I'm going from about a 4% interest rate to like 1.6. That's incredible. And the province has even a bigger benefit from that. Because their rate, they have a better credit rating than I do. They're going to get even a lower rate. So the debt that was taken on, that is having to be serviced now by the province, is actually much, much lower, the cost of taking on that debt. So you're absolutely right. My graph, I'm trying to put this into my 10-minute presentation, which was very, very carefully timed by Wendy. And I'm trying to display it. But there's a whole big macroeconomic discussion that Professor Patterson could lead us off on if we wanted to go into that segment afterwards. But there's a lot to go there. Your other question about, where's the balance? I mean, this is why I follow Hugh so closely on social media, because he has a lot to offer on different perspectives on that, different than I'm used to hearing. And it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. And I think, personally, the question that I'm left with is, and it might sound cliche, but it's not intended to. The question I'm left with is, years from now, when I look back on this, do I want to say, we went through this and barely had an economic impact? Or do I want to look back and say, we went through this and had protected as many lives as possible? Like, what matters at the end of the day? And I realize there's an argument, Hugh would be quick to say, well, there's a human cost to a negative economy, right? Well, that's all part of the balance. And so where does that come out? And so in my first slide, when I tried to show our death to million population, I'm trying to show where we are in the world compared to other countries so that we can gauge, are we doing this properly? Aren't we? Where does it all lie? So it's the question that is the question of the day and indeed the year, and will be the question that people look back on, for decades to come when they assess the job that all levels of government did through this. And they will have their ability to weigh in on that and cast judgment. And I just hope that I can say I tried to protect as many lives as possible, not just from the pandemic, but from the economic part as well.
And last question, Leon second.
Everyone here in this room has been impacted by the pandemic for certain. I represent an industry that has been completely shut down since March 13th. We went home for 2 weeks, 8 months ago. we at this point have no clear picture of when we will be conducting business again. 7,000-seat arena, yes, we are capable of holding events for 50 people, and we work very hard to deliver those. We all know that that's not any sort of viable economic plan. We are just one facility. With the economic impact that's generated through events such as the Briar, all of the concerts, certainly our hockey team when we're able to play again. I look to the province and the government for the support, which has been very important to us thus far. The wage subsidy is certainly our lifeline and has kept us able to contribute and to plan for when we are able to get back out there and do what it is that the community needs, not necessarily food, shelter, and the basic needs of a human being, but the needs that give a certain quality of life. So I'm arguing for something that's, yes, a little further on down the line, right? We have our priorities. I'm certainly not trying to jump the line there. But it's really important for me to bring to your attention that throughout this country, and frankly worldwide, this industry is closed. It is decimated. There are businesses that are iconic in this country, worldwide, that will never come back. So I ask both of you to go back to your colleagues and to be the visionaries, to work on something to help the sports and entertainment industry have some sort of safety net under it so that we are able, as an industry, to be able to deliver those quality of life experiences once we get through this short-term crisis into the longer-term recovery.
I guess I'll lead that off. Lynn, first of all, you guys did incredible things with helping with the assessment center. The lineups that you had there, and the fact that Leon Center opened its door to work with the public health community should be commended. And I thank you and everybody at Leon Center for doing that. Very good friend of mine, one of my 2 or 3 closest friends, is an audio engineer, works in the industry. He's a freelancer, works on contract, lived in Toronto, and in March, we talk every couple days. In March, he was booked 6-7 months in advance. I'm going to be in BC doing this concert, I'm going to be here doing this festival. In a matter of 48 hours, he went from his schedule for 7 months being packed to nothing. Everything dropped off all at once. He's since said, the industry has said to him, don't expect anything meaningful till 2022 or the fall of 2021. He has since got rid of his place in Toronto and moved back to Sydenham with his mom. And he's my age, in his mid-40s, and he's basically forced to do this. He doesn't want to be doing it, and now he's looking for other employment. A total, complete shift from what he went to school for, what he was trained for, to what he'd been doing for 20 years. And there are so many people like that. And this is the problem, is that the sectors of the economy have been hit in a way that I'm not even necessarily worried about once you get through the pandemic. Once you get through it, yeah, you have the ability to open up and have concerts again. But is the public confidence going to be there to want to go to a room with 6,000 other people in downtown Kingston? Will our mindsets have changed so much by then that we think that it's not normal to be doing that without a mask on? And so there's going to be a role, without a doubt, for all levels of government to play in addressing this issue and building back that confidence. And to Hugh's point, to building back the confidence of travelers to come back to Canada and say Canada is a safe place to visit. We need to work on that together. We need a plan to come out of this together so that we can hopefully get back to something that resembles normal, in particular in that particular field. And I'll just say, because this will be my last time up here, I just want to say that I think that the city of Kingston did a tremendous job with what they did on Princess Street. And I know that the mayor took a lot of heat at first for having too many barricades and stuff like that. But people were doing this having never done it before. On the spot, trying to say, what do we do? Give me some ideas. Okay, get the stuff. Let's do this right now. But they adapted very quickly, and they said, okay, this wasn't maybe not the best way. What about this configuration? And we ended up having a fairly viable, given the circumstances, a viable summer. So I know the mayor took a lot of heat over that at the time, but I think it ended up turning out very well, and the city has done a tremendous job of trying to protect those industries and trying to support them as much as they can.
I think the public confidence is going to be tremendous, but also the public's ability to bear the weight of those non-essential expenditures. How many people are going to be in a fiscal situation where concerts aren't part of their budget? That's a really scary thing to kind of look towards and try and figure out how many season ticket holders are going to have trouble justifying that expense moving forward. I'm very excited to watch France games again. But I understand that, and so I hear you. I don't have those answers right now, obviously, and I think your question was more of an ask that we go back and fight for that. One thing that we are working on, and Hugh, this actually comes back to yours as well, MPP Gates, who's the MPP for Niagara Centre, the Niagara Falls, even more than us, is a tourism-driven economy. And casinos were one of the last things to open. They have partially reopened. Some of them may have to close again because of the second wave. So he's using his current private members bill ballot spot he's put forward a private members bill for $1,000 tax credit for any Ontarian that holidays in Ontario. And as long as you have expenditures showing that you did a staycation, or that you went to Niagara, or the folks from Niagara came to Kingston, then you would qualify for that tax credit at the end. I think we need more inventive solutions like that. And I think they need to be ongoing, and they need to kind of be there as we come out the other side of the actual pandemic. How can we incentivize people to get back into public, to spend their money here, the community members staying here, deciding that Kingston is actually a fabulous place to get to go and have a really good time. And then how do we find really creative ways to show the city off to everyone around us? How do we pull those people back here? And Karen and I had the beginnings of this conversation about how creative we're going to need to be in how we do that. I was thrilled to see the creation of the YGK box, so hopefully folks are spending money on local businesses for gifts. That's a drop in the bucket. It's going to need to be far more comprehensive than that, and we're going to need everyone at the table to design what that looks like and then figure out a way to do it.
Thank you. Well, we're way over our time, so I apologize on many fronts right now. But you were very engaged with the conversation, so I didn't want to shut that down. But again, my greatest apologies to those who were going to be here virtually and weren't. I apologize our technician who didn't attend today. Next time. So again, thank you to Utilities Kingston, Jim Keach and his team for sponsoring today's event. Christopher Marks and his team for hosting us today, so thank you for that. And of course, we appreciate the contributions of our speakers today, Mark, Brian, and Ian. Thank you so much for your time, and I know I've taken much more of it than I said I would, but I think it's a valuable time for us to have those conversations and to engage with each other. We will continue on this path, and looking forward, we are going to